Today we're going to be repairing this cracked bumper on a friend's Toyota Camry, I believe. So we're going to start this repair by putting a couple of staples in the crack. Usually I would clean up the edges first, but being this one's so damaged, I want to put a little structure back into it before I go start to work on it. So I've got two different staples I would use. The wave staple. This one obviously is going to cover a lot of area and create a strong repair, or a smaller one which is easier to hide underneath the filler once we're done. This car, I'm going to start on this edge down here just with a small one because it's such a small space. We'll start with that and put a couple of these in there just to get it started. So we got the first one in there okay, as you can see. I'm going to put a couple more down on the bottom here just to, again, get a little more structure before I start working on it. Okay, as you can see, we've got one in already. I'm going to put a couple more down below just to add a little more structure before we start to do work on it and potentially rip it any further. So we've got a couple staples in, one here, a couple down below to hold this together. As we continue to move and we add some more staples and we weld the plastic back together, we'll bring this even closer together. But before I move on, I've taped off the edges here because I'm going to do a little bit of sanding of this to kind of clean up the edge and lower it down a little bit. So after I put the staples in, I'll be able to trim them off, filler on top of it to hide the staples before we paint and clear that. So got a little bit of tape on here to protect anything I don't want. A lot of times we'll take these out, but this one had some hardware behind there as opposed to just clips to pull it out, so it wasn't able to come out. So now we're going to start putting staples in up throughout the whole thing. We've sanded it down a little bit so that we got rid of the paint, so when it comes time to weld these back together, we'll have a cleaner surface to work with. What I'm hoping you'll be able to see here is how the tool works. As we're running heat through the staple by pressing the button here, and what we're doing is we're basically melting the plastic around here, and as I think you'll be able to see in the video, it's actually going to melt right into there. And then we just turn the heat off once it's in there beyond where we can see it, but not so far that we've gone through the plastic. So let the heat off, the plastic cools around it, and we're able to pull that off, and we've got a nice clean repair. As you can see, it's getting closer together too as we build this up. So even if it weren't close, we'd be able to repair it with sanding it down and putting some filler on there, but the better you get it at this stage of the game, the easier it is and the cleaner and better results you'll get. And we're coming up to the end here. The crack's pretty much done, but I'm going to do an extra one in here just to make sure we got beyond where the crack is visible to any crack that's maybe in the plastic but not showing through the paint, so we make sure we get a good fit. The other thing is this one, I don't know if you can see, it didn't melt all the way through. There's some metal showing right here in the middle of the staple, so before I trim these edges off, I'm going to go ahead and reseat this by just putting it back on the end, heating it up again, and making sure it goes in further. If you don't do that and you trim the edges off, you're kind of stuck because it's hard to get out of there and you can't get it back in any further. So you end up having to kind of dig it out and do more damage, which means more body filler and repair work and more time. So we're switching over to the camera on my phone as the other ones decided to stop working. So you can see that we've cut off all the ends of the staples. We're going to go ahead and sand these down next. To sand these down, we're going to use the 3-inch Norton Blaze sanding disc. This thing is fabulous, will rip through anything. So what we're doing here is knocking down the edges of the staples so that we can come back with filler, fill in on top of there before we paint and clear. Now that we've got the staples all in and cleaned up, we're going to go ahead and take our welder or soldering iron and we're going to weld these two pieces of plastic back together. So even though they're stapled together now and they're not going to come apart, there's still a crack in there, and if we were to paint it and clear coat over it, that flexible piece would cause a crack to happen within the paint and clear coat over time. So we want to go ahead and mold these two pieces of plastic back together by melting each edge. We've gone through and welded the seam so that that's all molded back together. We've also sanded it down, so we started with some pretty rough sanding to make sure all of the hard surfaces are cut down, but then I finished up with a 180 sandpaper. I do that just to make sure nothing is going to stand up taller than the filler, or even possibly just a skim coat, probably maybe a little of both. But so when we're done, we don't have any pieces of plastic sticking up through the repair, so we get a nice clean finish after we paint and clear this. As I think you can see, we've got it all repaired and filled. You'll notice there's an additional spot to the left. When I was scuffing to get ready for paint, I realized there was a second crack in it. So pretty much good to go. The crack is gone and we'll be painting and clearing soon.